Hey guys, welcome back to Learn Python the Hard Way. Today we're going to continue with exercise 11 of the Learn Python the Hard Way book. As always, you can find the link to the current chapter in the description below. This is part of the paid version of the book. So if you have the book, you can actually follow the link. Otherwise, you won't have access to it. But alternatively, of course, feel free to just follow along. So in the last chapter, exercise 10, we took a look at escape sequences and how to work with strings, and today the focus is going to be about asking questions. So most of what software does in general is the following. We take some kind of input from a person, we change it, and we print out something to show how it changed. And in the previous exercises we actually have been printing out strings. But now we're going to learn something new, and we're going to focus on getting input from a person and then working with that. So let's get started by actually creating a new Python file. And for that, I'm going to hop over to the terminal and I'm going to type in code for Visual Studio Code, which is a text editor I use. If you use something else like Atom, for example, feel free to enter Atom instead, followed by the name of the exercise. So in this case, or the file rather, I'm going to create a new file called exercise11.py and press enter, and this is going to create a new Python file. Now let's get started with actually typing out the different sections here, the different statements. So the first one is how old are you? And followed by end. And we're going to enter a single quote, a space, and then a single quote. And as we learned before, the end parameter here that we can pass into print actually is going to replace the default new line that we otherwise have after the after the string here that we print out, with whatever we enter in here. So in this case, actually, instead of having how old are you and then a new line, we actually gonna just have a space after that, and then directly the next line or input is going to start. So in this case, we're going to define a variable age, and we're going to set it equal to input. And input, of course, is the new function we are using to actually collect some input from the user. Next, let's enter a new print statement. How tall are you? And again, we're going to enter it. And let me just put it outside of the after the double quoted string here, and equals, and then again a space character. And now we're going to get the height that the user should input. And the benefit of doing that is that if he types this out and we have this end character here, then it's going to ask us for the input just right after the question. So we don't have to have it on separate lines, which might be confusing, but it's in one line. Next, we're going to print out how much do you weigh, question mark. And again, let's repeat that with the end parameter here with a space character. And we're going to get the weight as an input. And finally, we're going to print this out using the printf way of doing it, so we can actually pass in some variable names. And of course, we're going to do that by using the curly braces. And then within those, we're going to type out the variable name. All right, let's save the file and let's hop into our terminal again. And we can type out the version of Python we're going to use. So for example, Python3 in this case, followed by the file name to execute it, and press enter. And now it's going to start with how old are you, which is the first print statement here. And now, instead of printing out the entire program, it actually asks us for some input. Just because we're using the input method here. So let's just enter some age and let's press enter. How tall are you? And how much do you weigh? And then actually it's going to print out the last statement here. And then we're using the printf function. We actually are embedding the different variables that we provided. So here it's taking our age that we provided, our height and our weight, and is printing that out. Let's check that with the solution. Yeah, that pretty much is the same. We can execute it one more time using exactly the same input. So here we are entering the height in feet and the weight in pounds. And then it's basically printing out exactly the same thing that we just saw before. And here's an additional note on what we just saw before. We put the end equals and then the space character within single quotes at the end of each print line. This tells print to not end the line with a new line character and go to the next line. That's just what we saw, that we basically entered the input in the same line. If we didn't do that, if we just remove this here, like this, and if we now execute it again, then as we can see, the input is now on the next line, so it's not directly behind it, and that might be a little bit confusing. It's a little bit nicer to have it in the same line, so that's the reason why we basically entered that end value here with the space character. So let's take a look at the study drills for this exercise. The first one is to go online and find out what Python's input does, which we have just been using here. So let's do that. So here let's just take the first link, the W3 schools article, and here we can see an example, again a print statement, and then we basically get an input and store it in a variable and print that out. So as a parameter that we pass to input, we basically enter optionally a prompt, a string representing a default message before the input. So we could do that. In our example here, we left it empty pretty much. And here we can see the definition and usage. So the input function allows user input, as we saw before, and then that is in our case stored in a variable to be used later in the print function here. So can you find other ways to use the input function? Try some of the samples you find. So, all right, let's head over here where we just been before. And here we can just have another example to ask for the name of the user, collect the input, and then basically print out a statement. So let's just click on try it for ourselves. And actually what we can maybe do is just to enter a prompt in here. Let's just remove that for now. Okay, enter your name. All right, so let's do that here one more time. Okay, so enter my name and then it's printing it out to me. So that's another way of using it. And then the last study drill here, write another form like this to ask some other questions. All right, so let's just hop back into that file here and maybe just below that statement, we could, for example, say, for example, favorite programming language, and we can have that as an input. And before that, we can print, for example, and again, let's do end and have a space in there, and then we can print out All right, let's save that. Actually, for right now, I'm just going to comment out the rest of the code by pressing Command and then slash. And now we can just run this one more time. So of course it should be Python, and then it's printing it out. All right, finally, let's take a look at some common student questions. How do I get a number from someone so I can do math? That's a little advanced, but try x and then int input. So here we get some input from a user, which would be a string by default. And then we need to convert that into a number. So for example, into an integer. So we wrap the input statement with int, and then that gets a number as a string from input and then converts it to an integer using int. Then finally, I put my height into raw input like this, input like this, but it doesn't work. You don't put your height in there, you type it directly into the terminal. All right, so we don't put it inside of the input statement here, but we would then, of course, execute the code and then input it in the terminal pretty much, and that would be then passed into that variable and stored in there. All right, so that's it for exercise 11, and see you guys in the next video with exercise 12.